Hello and welcome to another episode of Outstream. Today we're going to discuss ITSM in the cloud or on the ground. So there's been a lot of talk about this, and here to help me understand a little bit better of what's what is my good friend Dick Stark from RightStar Systems. Welcome back to the zoo, Dick.
Oh, thanks, Alf. It's terrific to be here.
There's been a lot of hype around the cloud over the last few years. I myself worked for a SaaS company before I came to BMC, and when we were out there, we talked about it is SaaS or death. And if you listen to some of the vendors today, they seem to be saying that same mantra, that if you don't put it in the cloud, you're going to die out. Is that hype or is there truth to that? Is there a pro and cons for both on-premise and cloud? What's your position?
Oh, well, it's one size does not fit all, right? So BMC, the great thing about BMC is that it has solutions that work both in the cloud or on-premise. And I've spent a fair amount of time with this subject because, you know, I'm tired of going out to our customers where they might say, gee, this is just too costly to run, or it's complicated, it's cumbersome to use, and it's out of date, it'll cost me too much to upgrade, therefore, I've got to upgrade. I've got to go to SaaS or something to that effect. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think they're being a little bit short-sighted, and you know, IT's really evolving, right? I mean, everything is about bring your own device now. It's cloud-based. It's the IT is becoming a broker of services now, not just a provider of services. So everybody's thinking it's got to you got to get something in the cloud. Well, that's not necessarily the case, and we've done a fair amount of thinking about this because we have customers that are both in the cloud and on-premise. So I would like to talk a little bit about that, and I think if you back up a little bit, you might say, well, who's to blame about all this? I mean, why are these customers talking about this? Why are they upset, and should they blaming BMC right now? And I say absolutely not, right? I mean, Remedy may not be perfect here, but it's the whole ecosystem that's to blame. That would include systems integrators. It might include the IT departments. It might include consultancies like RightStar. That cloud is not necessarily the be-all and end-all for every single IT department now.
Yeah. Are there any simple delineations of saying this company should fit in the cloud, this company fits on ground? Is there as simple as that, or do you have to go case by case?
Well, I think it's really case by case. It really depends on what you want to do. And let me just start out and give you a real simple example.
Yeah.
We have been using a cloud-based product. Everybody's heard of Salesforce before. Okay, well, we're a small company, but we rely on Salesforce. It's a mission-critical type of application. We've used it now for 10 years.
Yep.
Okay, every quarter we pay about $6,000 for Salesforce. So after a year, and again for a small company, after a year it's about $25,000 per year. You multiply that by 10 years, and all of a sudden you've got $250,000 worth. Well, if we had gone with that on-premise based system, would we have spent after 10 years $250,000? There's no way. Wouldn't have even been close. Do I care about that? Well, the one thing, I'm writing these checks every quarter, so it's not that bad. It doesn't really seem to hit the pocketbook too hard. And I like Salesforce. It's a good application. We get a lot of value out of it. I don't know of other products that I'd want to switch to. So from that perspective, I guess I don't really care. Okay, and I think that's kind of analogous to a lot of companies that may be moving off into the cloud. And on any type of application, it could be Service Desk, it could be something just as simple as infrastructure, go to Rackspace or Amazon. You don't really care too much about the cost. I think what you're doing is you're targeting more of the performance that you're getting and the convenience. We have a customer, and I won't say the name, but they're in the financial services space, and they've been using Remedy on demand for a while. And I had an opportunity to talk there to our it's a systems consultant. He's really a Remedy administrator there. And so I was saying, well, tell me, what do you like about Remedy on demand? And he said, well, the one thing I don't miss, I don't miss these patching that I would always have to do, and so I don't have to worry about that. And as a result, I've been able to spend my time on really rolling this out to all the areas in the organization that I think could really benefit from having Remedy. So So it's been kind of a good thing. Now, he's not on the latest version, but he's got that all scheduled. So that shouldn't be quite as big a deal for him as it may be for a remedy on-premise customer. Okay, so that's something to consider. But the customers that we have that want to continue to stay on premise, they're the ones, you may say, well, it's a security issue, okay, because if you have your own on-premise based system, security is something that you can control to a great extent, and you could make the argument. I've certainly heard where you can actually say that IT department security may be less secure than somebody else's, maybe a SaaS, for example, a SaaS provider. But I don't know that I really think that security is the issue. I think it's really a control issue. And for example, let me give you another example. We have a customer, it's been a long-time customer, and they're going to stick with on-premise. In fact, they just migrated from Service Desk Express to Remedy, or they're in the process of doing that. And they have a very large data center, and it's all about control. There's no way that they want to maybe I shouldn't say hassle, but they don't really want to hassle with the thought of having to deal with a cloud-based SaaS ITSM solution right now, because they lose control. For example, if you wanted to make a change, depending upon who you're working with, it may take several days. It could take longer than that in order to impact that change based upon that MSP or that cloud provider's change policies. And they didn't want to deal with that. They had their own data center. They trusted what's there. They just say, we want to also stick with on-premise. We like it. And it also kind of goes back to what I was talking about cost as well. And that's where another area where I think if you do the numbers, and I can give you a couple of examples if you'd like, where you'll find that if you're going to stick with on-premise, it's going to really cost you less money in the long run.
Yeah, the dirty secret is, and we did some of this market research a few years ago, before BMC software, and we looked at the cost, and we realized after 3 to 5 years, you hit a break-even part, and after that, depending on how big your maintenance is, but after that, the on-premise start to make you money, or at least cost you less than it would normally. So, Benioff's and his mantra notwithstanding, it's not as simple as cost. But one thing I've heard from people who like it in the cloud, and one of them is one of America's largest food companies, they say we're in the food business. We're not in the IT infrastructure business. Right. Because running a software like Remedies that manages your entire IT world, right, it's not like Salesforce. Salesforce is a Rolodex on steroids. IT management software are nuclear scientists compared to that. So you need an entire infrastructure, and you need to manage it beyond just the change management, which is a good part because it's a bigger problem than a lot of people think. So his idea was, if you allow me to manage IT rather than manage the infrastructure I need to manage IT, it helps me. So he went with Remedy on demand. Are there a lot of those out there who feel that? Are we going toward that trend that they want to worry about the infrastructure, they just want to manage their own world?
Well, I think so. I mean, but what's going to happen to the IT departments, right? I mean, I guess if I were in IT and I'm seeing that the infrastructure is moving into the cloud, then I better not be a server guy, right? I better make sure that whatever I am, I'm very high up on the food chain in terms of complexity, because those are the kind of people in IT that are going to get to keep their jobs. Now, I'm not saying that people are going to lose their jobs in IT, but certainly if you're involved in something that's become commoditized, why are you still there? Work on something that's a little bit more complicated. And I think you'll be around, maybe get involved in the ERP package. I mean, certainly ITSM, mature ITSM, sometimes gets a bad rap. I sometimes say, well, that's too complicated. We don't want to use something like that. But that's certainly a possibility. Back to I just want to go back to the cost area again a little bit. Let's dissect that a little bit more, because there's different ways to look at this, and have done some analysis based upon Remedy versus Remedy on demand, okay, and then we did the same thing because BMC has all these different products. Then we did the same. We looked at, okay, well, footprints, which is typically on premise, versus Remedy Force, okay. And in the first case, we did a study, and we did this for a very large government customer, and they were considering moving away, on premise versus on demand, and they are going to have these products typically for a long time. I mean, in large government agencies and probably large enterprises, for that matter. The products are sticky. I mean, once you start with Remedy or a Remedy competitor, you're probably going to stick with it. Once you make that decision, no matter what. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, given that you're going to have the product for probably at least 5 years, it's not something that you're just going to say, okay, well, I'll go to ServiceNow, and if it doesn't work out, well, next year I'll switch back to Remedy. I mean, yes, it might happen, right? I mean, it could, but it's not as likely because you make an investment.
Yeah.
Right. It wouldn't be so. So that's why I think it's important if you fully understand what you're getting into. And there's a lot of different variables. And if you look, for example, at what ServiceNow says about this, no matter how you slice it from a ServiceNow perspective, it's always going to be much cheaper. Your ROI is going to be much higher if you go in the cloud with ServiceNow versus on-premise with Remedy. But what they aren't really taking into consideration is how easy it is to use Remedy now. Okay, on an on-premise version. For example, there's these things called overlays. After you've been at version 7.604, when you're going to upgrade, it's kind of like doing a Microsoft Office upgrade. So you're not really having to deal with these long, drawn-out upgrade processes that you may have had to deal with in the past. And by the way, if you're going to be using ServiceNow, there's still going to be an upgrade process. You're not going to just come in one morning, you're on the old version, the next morning you're on the new. There's going to be some planning that's going to go behind all of that. So it's not it's just not it's not the case. And so if you figure, well, maybe you're going to pay a little bit more money to install an on-premise in terms of labor cost, okay, and then there's certainly some hardware costs that you would have to deal with. And we looked, when we did our analysis, we looked at the cost of what the hardware cost of rack space, what that would cost, and to do some of these sophisticated things like the disaster recovery and everything else that you might get from a managed service provider where you buy from the cloud. And we looked at that, and we looked at the implementation cost being relatively similar, maybe a little bit more for on-premise. And then we figured that, once, especially if you're an enterprise user, you're going to want to have an administrator. You're going to need an administrator if you're using it on demand or if you're using it on-premise. And so if you add all these things up over a period of time, at about 5 years or so, you're going to see significant price advantage if you stay on-premise. Okay, and we did the same thing with Remedy Force and Footprints. And Remedy Force is not that expensive, and Remedy Force is not that expensive, but neither is Footprints. And Footprints is an on-premise, product, and the maintenance, it doesn't really cost that much. So that's where you see some significant savings if you're going to just stick with something like Footprints rather than go to Remedy Force. But again, then with Footprints, there are some upgrades that you would have to deal with down the road, and it is an on-premise application. So there'd be some maintenance that you would have to deal with. But strictly from a dollars and cents perspective, and taking a look at the disk cost and so on, you're still going to save money with an on-premise solution. And you know what? That's why years ago, and you've probably heard this before, but BMC had tried to move into an on-demand product, and nobody bought it. And the reason they didn't buy it is they looked at the numbers and they said it just doesn't make any sense. And so it didn't really sell very well. But then what's happened is that other companies have come out and they have proven, especially companies that only sell on-demand or SaaS version, that it does sell. And so it's put BMC in kind of a conundrum here where they offer both, and so now they're being sort of asked to justify, well, what's best, one or the other, whereas some of the other competitors out there may say, well, don't even bother with that. We only got one solution. It's the best one. That sort of thing. But that's not the case. It's kind of like what I like to say. Owning Remedy is kind of like, for most customers, it's kind of like having a Ferrari that's parked in your garage. And why not take advantage of what you already own and get it out of the garage and get it onto the freeway where you're going to be able to really make some hay. So and and that's kind of what we're trying to do, is to really work with a lot of customers that we already have Remedy, that have it in an on-premise version, get them upgraded to the latest version, and make sure they're getting some real value out of this application that they're using right now.
And that's interesting you bring up.
Important.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up value, because we've got so fixated on the delivery mechanism, which is more of an advantage to the SaaS vendor, for example. It's they who benefit from having a single platform, not that anyone in the, other than Remedy Force, there are no ITSM, pure ITSM SaaS platforms. Everything is hosted one way or another. So we got fixated on that, but what you brought up was value, and I see a lot of customers went out, they're talking to them. As a perfect example is what you're talking about, Ferrari. They use the service desk, they sprinkle a little bit of change management on it, but they don't take advantage of the full suite. And that's not only for BMC, like HPCA would sit here and say the same thing. Do you think that's going to change now, because IT is becoming far more intense? We as user of IT are expecting more, our work demands more, the future is going to usher in more. Do you think that the IT department will now take the Ferrari out for a spin? Is that what we're going to see?
Well, that's really what we're trying to push for. For example, I just went down to a customer of ours, a relatively new customer. They're doing a Remedy upgrade right now, and they're making some pretty good progress. But like a lot of things, IT right now is really not number one on the list of things to get done. Excuse me, I meant to say ITSM. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, the challenge is, well, how do you get it moved up the priority list so that people really understand the value? And I think that's kind of what our job is. So one of the things that I had suggested was an ITSM day, and maybe we'll just make it a half a day. But what we're going to do is we're going to go in there and we're going to show them a couple of workshops, and we're going to start with service request management and service catalog, and we're going to do a workshop so that this is something that they need to move to, because that's another area where they're going to see incredible value if they can get a system, or maybe a request management system at a minimum, and hopefully get to more of a true service catalog down the road, where they're going to get to order maybe laptops or desktops and a couple of things. We want to start simple to really make it look easy with having a mature ITSM system like that. So we got to get the people excited about that, and we thought rather than try to do this remotely, we'd come in and bring it in, be there in person. And we've also asked BMC to come in and help us out as well, and we want to show them My IT. And I think that'll be a lot of fun, because in this particular group, even though it's a government agency, they all have iPads and tablets and so on. So I thought, wow, why not, right? So they've actually already bought some IIT, and they're going to use it. And so we want to get them excited about that too. So we'll have some, how we're going to set up your service catalog, just kind of a short session to get people energized about it. And then we're going to do the same thing with My IT. And we're going to get kind of, well, what do you want? How do you want to set up the menus? We may be rolling out version 2 of that. I'm not exactly sure where we are, but there's a lot we can do, and a lot of people that would say, okay, I get it now. This makes a lot of sense. We should have been focusing more on this Ferrari that we have parked in the garage, and let's do it, and let's make something happen, because that's what we want to do. It's really our job as consultancies to make sure that they're getting the right value, and that's where I think our efforts really need to be focused now.
I couldn't agree more with you. I think the value is what we need to articulate more clearly, so people understand what they order, and they already own it. We're not talking about large additional cost here. It's some tweaking and some refocusing of priorities, and boom, you're in a Ferrari on the freeway. So yeah.
Well, and then that kind of reminds me, because I do a weekly blog, and I'm writing about Apollo 13 right now.
Yes.
And
what's the name of your blog, and where can one find it?
Well, it's dick1stark.com. That's all there is to it. And so the next issue is going to be about Apollo 13, and everybody knows what happened. It's one of the better known stories, and it really in the world, where the objective was to bring these guys back to Earth alive, right? And so you may think, well, what the heck does Apollo 13 have to do with ITSM? And the answer is it's really all about problem solving. And so we have the simulation. We didn't invent it, but we certainly have access to this program, and BMC offers it as well. And so what that means is that you come in and you might have a whole group of people. Somebody's the mission control director. You have some level 1 people. You have an incident manager. You have a problem manager. There's somebody at the chains. There's level 3 people. And again, the whole objective then is to return the astronauts safely to the Earth. So this was just last Friday we were doing this, and the first go round, the astronauts didn't make it back. And the reason is because the communication wasn't all that good. We didn't have the proper service level agreements in place. We didn't understand the priorities involved. You know, we had all these tickets come in, and you know, we didn't know which was important and which one was not, and we focused too much on the what's it called, the small stuff. We were sweating the small stuff too much, and we didn't realize that we need to focus on some of these other things that were critical to bringing these guys back home alive. And it was really a good lesson for everybody that was in the room. As kind of how ITSM works. It's the same way that, you know, NASA may work when they're dealing with these difficult types of problem-solving challenges. And so a lot of people that were taking the session, they got it. They understood. They said, wow, you know, we never really thought that, you know, it was just a necessary evil, right? The whole ITSM group, or the whole service desk that we have, we get it. There's some real value here. So that's kind of what that's what I'm talking about. And by educating people to the importance of that and showing them that, you know, there's options. You know, SaaS is great. On-premise still works fine too. That the whole idea is to continue to move forward and recognize that value.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I'm actually gonna look forward to reading that. And we've done something similar at BMC. That we had an airport simulation, and the first time you give it a go, you couldn't get a plane off the ground. You realize how hard it is.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm reading I like to read, and I'm reading a book right now, and it's called The Martian, and it's guy's name is Andy Weir that wrote this book. And so it's a fictional book. It takes place in the future, and a Mars mission has just departed the Mars, and they're going back to Earth, and they've left a guy, an astronaut, accidentally. You have to read the book to figure out all this, but anyway, they've accidentally left a guy behind on Mars. So the objective is, well, how do you get, if you think, you know, getting somebody back from Apollo 13 was difficult, how about somebody that's 120 million miles away? And the whole point of this book is it's all about problem solving, because this astronaut that's left behind just gets into one predicament after another. And it's, you know, I don't want to spoil the book for anybody that might read it, but it's really worth a good read, and it's also a fun way to think about problem solving.
I love it. I love it.
So.
Well, thank you, Dick. I really appreciate you taking the time coming to Zoo and educate us. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
Okay.
And I hope I can have you back soon.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. For the rest of you out there, take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.